G'day and welcome to Ozone number 4. This episode of Ozone is going to feature a couple of build projects that I've been working on over a couple of weeks, and we'll start with a look at the pelmets over the light stands that were featured in Ozone number 3, and we'll move on to the control panel that I've made for the Hunter River siding, which is featured in a couple of the earlier episodes. These segments have run over several weeks and are quite involved. I'll try and keep this video as short as possible, but my instinct is telling me that it'll probably be quite long, and with any luck we'll get it all into one video, and then we can move on, because after this video showing all of these steps, the Hunter River siding is essentially finished, and we can move on to something else. My hope is to work on some rolling stock or a loco next, and that will be a bit of a change from the layout work that I've been working on up till now. But let's get into it. This is just a shot of the pelmets over the light stands featured in Ozone number 3. They're just a mask for the lights over the layout. Just making the housing for the control panel for the Hunter River siding. It consists of a small box made of 12mm ply. This side here is around about 140mm wide, and the front from that end to that end is 220mm. It'll sit on the front of the layout, something like that, with the control panel in black sitting on top. I was concerned about the position of this control panel because I don't want it to get in the way. As you can see from this shot now, there's only just minimal clearance for this aisle, and while I'd love to be able to put it down in the centre here so that you can get at it from both ends, I feel it would get in the way of people getting past, and I can't really set it in any further because of this track here. So by having it at the end here, it's not as convenient as it would be operationally from down this end, but it will also draw people to this end of the aisle and get them out of the way if there's somebody operating in this part of the layout here, or here I should say. Drawing them down here will force them out of that central area. Okay, we've got the fascia installed on the Hunter River siding. Did this off camera because it's a fairly boring process, but I thought I'd just give you a quick look at it before I start installing the control panel down the other end of the line there. It's simply a piece of 3mm MDF that I painted on both sides. I painted it white on this side, and I painted my normal fascia colour, which is a sort of a yellow, ochre yellow colour. It's attached to a line or a series of 1x1 pine battens that run the length of the fascia, except where it joins. So where the join is, I've just used a piece of 2x1. This shows the control panel in place. I've mounted the two battens in place, but I haven't yet screwed the control panel housing onto those battens. There was just one small thing I needed to do before I installed it, was to drill this hole down here, and it was much easier to drill that in the workshop downstairs, bring it up and then place it. I've got enough room for the button board to go there and enough room for the switch 8 to go there. This hole is for wires coming in from the layout. I like to try and plan things like this out a little bit before I install them, which is why there's a hole here, even though I haven't got the plug point yet for the for my NCE DCC system. to actually install it, I've cut the holes on the fascia because I can't take the fascia back down and cut it flat when it's much easier to cut a piece of fascia like this or a piece of material like this flat when it's off the layout than it is against the layout. Neater and makes less mess in the layout room. So I've I've cut a couple of holes, one here and one further down there. You may just be able to see it in the front of the fascia, and I'll install those when I get them in about, I'm going to take a trip, and while I'm there I'll buy them when I'm away. I've now mounted the two components. The switch aid is there, it's the stationary decoder and the button board to connect with the face panel up the top here. I've started running the wires to the 5 turnouts. There's one for the junction, which is over there. Turnout there, the line comes down here, and I've wired up the final one at the end of the line there. I've got 3 more to go. What I do is I run the wires from these spools here up through this hole, just down loosely, and then I'll connect them up down here to the turnouts, and then just snip them off and label them with bits of blue tape until I'm ready to wire them up in one go. I'm putting in a little bit of work on the new control panel I'm making for the Hunter River siding. This is the panel here. It's a piece of 3mm MDF with a strip wood surround, which is 12mm by 12mm pine. This is not wood I purchased at a hobby shop, it's just wood I bought at a local hardware store. It's glued to the top, and I sprayed it white because the first coat of paint needs to be white. What I'll be doing is masking this off with some blue masking tape, and then overspraying that with black. I've decided to make a little paper map of the layout of the components and the lines, and I wanted to make sure that I had enough room for the components. The white dots are where the buttons will go, and I'm not sure if you can see that. The white dots are where the buttons can go, and the red dots are the LEDs I'll be using to indicate routes. The way I cut the masking tape up is I take this blue tape, just any random length I suppose it really is, just stick it down to there. And what I'll do is I'll get a pencil, some form of measuring. I'll measure out the distance I need, which will be about 5mm, between 4 and 5mm, draw a line and cut it with a nice sharp blade. I'm cutting a piece of masking tape like this across the diagram rather than straight, where I can use perhaps the edge or something else to reference a straight line. I need to cut these, trim these. Now I don't try to trim them along the edges. What I do is I just lay the straight edge in the centre of the other piece of masking tape and just cut it along that way, and then peel it back there so my edge is nice and straight. Just to clarify, I did this drawing in a thing called Artscape. I didn't use any sort of a map or photo underneath it. I just drew it out on the computer using that program, and then printed it out on my computer printer. I coloured the dots so that it was clearer, the red, so it was clearer for the camera, so that you could see where the LEDs were going to be. I could have left those white or any colour really if I'd wanted to. But while I invested probably an hour or so in drawing up this diagram, it's probably saved me the equivalent amount in time transferring it to that. I don't have to guess at the diagram sort of locations or where things are going to go. I can see everything's going to fit, so I know it's going to go in. Some of my other control panels I've done sort of, you know, on the fly as I've gone, and they haven't turned out as well as I'd like. They're much more crowded than I'd have liked, and I should have done this to start with. So this is something new for me, and I think it's worked out really well. Okay, there are one or two places where the black paint leaked under the tape, but and one little bit of tear out just here. But overall, the result's been pretty good, and I'll let the paint dry and harden over the next 12 to 24 hours, and move on to drilling the holes for the switches or buttons and the LEDs. Okay, I have the control panel painted, and I've drilled the holes in those spots where I need them for both the buttons, which are the larger holes, and some smaller holes for 3mm LEDs. The 3mm LEDs obviously go into a 3mm hole, and the larger holes are 7mm in diameter. What I've done for this particular control panel is printed out 4 deep decals for the various sidings, and on the paper I've also included some numbers for the various turnouts, and those numbers refer on the decals I'll be printing out. Those numbers refer to the DCC decoder address that each of those turnouts has or will have. I've got an Alps printer which allows me to print white decals for use in situations like this. I don't use the Alps printer very often, so I don't have it set up permanently, and it's getting quite old now, so I have to use an old laptop to control it. If you don't have an Alps printer, then it's very possible that sticking these white labels or these paper labels on here will work just as well. What I'll do is I'll put my decals on there and I'll overspray it with a clear coat of lacquer over the top. You could do exactly the same with these labels, and they'd look just as clear and work just as functionally. This printing process using an Alps printer, which is the object you can see in the background here, requires a bit of a trip down by way of ancient computer technology in a relative sense. I have a compact laptop here running Windows XP Professional, and as it's professional it must be good. It has a version of Word on it, which is Word 97 to 2003, and it's connected via an old style pin plug to the printer. The reason I have to use this setup and rather than just plug it in is because to get an Alps printer or an Alps printer driver to work on Windows 10, which is what I've got on my standard desktop computer, requires an arrangement that is well beyond my computer capabilities. I belong to an online forum on Alex Printing, and a couple of people have explained how you do it on that forum, and after about the first couple of sentences, I'm lost. So I continue to use this old laptop. It's still running very nicely, and you might be able to just see from the side, I've got the document. You probably can't see that, but I've got the document that I used to print out those paper labels in Word, and I'll use that just to print out the decals. It's that simple. There's nothing special about it. It's just using a Word document. Now, to print it out in white, I have to remove one of the cartridges. The printer uses these old-style cartridges that have a ribbon with colours on them, to the white cartridge, which is essentially the same colour, but it's the same cartridge, but it's just a white one. You put it in like that. Close the lid, and the printer reads the fact that it's got a white cartridge now. And the rest of it is pretty much standard. You go to the print screen. Okay. If we're lucky, it should print out. As you can see, I've got the main label of Hunter River Siding there, and 2 Queen's Wharf, the dairy and the mill are both labelled, and the numbers refer to the DCC decoder addresses of each of the turnouts. I'll spray the lacquer on when the decals are completely dry and install the components, and then this is will be pretty close to being ready to install on the layout. Okay, I've installed all of the components into the control panel. This is quite a small control panel. It has 12 buttons, these pairs of black objects here, and similar number or the same number of LEDs. Buttons are in a pack of 100. Got them on eBay. They're just black momentary off buttons, and they're secured by a small nut just tightened on the front. The LEDs are just, at the moment, are just inserted into some small holes I've drilled, and I retain those with a small dab of PVA white wood glue. Not because they hold them terribly securely, but they're very easy to get out if you need to. But I don't want to permanently install them in there, so I'm not going to use, I don't use anything like epoxy glue or a super glue, because I want to be able to get them out if I need to. Quite often they fail as you're installing them, or you make a small mistake, or if you don't test them before they go in, there's bound to be 1 or 2 that don't work. I've tested all the buttons as well to make sure that they work and operate, because there's nothing more annoying than having to find that one of the buttons doesn't work. Okay, this is the back of the control panel. It's all wired up. This spaghetti bowl of wires is connected to all the components that are installed on the front of the panel. Buttons in pairs and the LEDs. There's a bit of colour coding going on here. Black and white wires to the LEDs are common from the green wire and that, but generally speaking, we're ready to install it. I brought the control panel out to the layout, and just placed it on the housing just to check fit. And as you can see from the bottom, however, I haven't hooked it up yet. I haven't yet hooked the control panel up to the layout because I'm still working on the job of connecting the turnouts to the switch 8, which is that component there, through these orange and blue wires. I've done 2. I've run wires out to the turnout motors. I have 3 or 4 more to go. So the next job is to run some more of these wires out to the 3 other turnouts. Install the control panel and get it running, and then we can move on to the next job. Okay, while I was installing the control panel for the Hunter River siding, I had also decided to put some other furniture along the front of the fascia. The Hammerhead Throttle from NCE has its own pocket, homemade pocket there. I've also got a car card box attached to the front there, which is this object over here, with one of the waybills installed that I'm planning to use on the next operating session. This is back down the end of the aisle where the control panel is. You can still see some wires hanging down below the control panel. Those are for a turnout I haven't yet installed. The control panel is actually working, and as you will see, it's operating fine. All the turnouts work, and the loco runs through it. At the same time as installing the other various bits and pieces along the fascia, I decided to put a piece of ply along here, and I installed that as a small shelf. I've got my glasses sitting on there that you can see. That's intended to be a place to put the cards, maybe put a pencil, pen, uncoupling, magnet, anything that's going. As my mate Daryl in Melbourne said, it's probably also for a stubby or two, but it's probably the delirium brought on by him getting COVID-19 down in Melbourne. The reason it has a curved front is because it was a piece of ply at the end of a... I needed some ply cut off a sheet I had, and I'd been cutting curves of roadbed out of this sheet, and it has a curve along the front edge, which is the equivalent of one of the roadbed pieces I cut off. Seemed like a good idea, and it looks quite attractive. I just slapped a couple of coats of Estopol on it and then screwed it into the fascia. One thing you may notice from this video is the fact that my wiring is dangling down below the control panel, and there's a couple of reasons for that. I don't actually mind the wiring on show to some degree. It's a little bit longer than I'd normally have, and I gave it plenty of length because in case the wiring from the hinged lid needs to be able to reach the top there. So when it comes down, now there's a couple of ways I can overcome that. I can bundle it up and secure it with some cable ties. I don't want anything catching, but the chances of anything being under there to catch that wiring is very slim. So the fact that I've got wiring dangling down is bound to attract comment from people. I'm okay with it. So that wraps it up for this video. I hope you've got something from it, and I hope it doesn't go too long. But as I've asked before or mentioned before, subscribe and like the videos if you feel so inclined. It does help get them noticed, and it motivates me to make some more. Until next time, bye for now.